All right, so today we're going to start our second unit, and we're going to start by defining some vocabulary words that are going to be useful when we're simplifying expressions and equations. The first word we're going to write down is an expression. And an expression is a list of mathematical terms with no equal sign. So expression versus equation, right? Equation has an equal sign, expression does not. So for example, we might see something like 3f plus 3m. There's no equal sign, so this is an expression. The next vocabulary word we're going to talk about is the word term. And a term is a number multiplied by a variable. So in this example, 3f is a term and 3m is a term. The really important part when we talk about terms is that we need to look in front of the coefficient to see if the number is positive or negative. Coefficient is the number in front of the letter. So for example, there's no sign in front of the 3, the coefficient of f, and so we would assume that's positive. The coefficient of m, we see a plus sign, so that would also be positive. In this example, our terms are 3f and 3m. Next, we're going to talk about the distributive property. And this is where we multiply the term directly outside of the parentheses to everything inside of the parentheses. So for example, we may have 3 times f plus m. And what we would do is do 3 times f and then 3 times a positive m. So we'd end up with 3f plus 3m. Lastly, we're going to talk about like terms. And those are terms whose variables are the exact same. So see how these have different letters? Those would not be considered like terms. In order for something to be a like term, we need the same letter. And in some cases, if there's exponents, we need the same exponent. If we are asked to simplify an expression or an equation, what they're really asking us to do is to write it with as few terms as possible. Of course, we still want to keep the equation balanced or the expression balanced. We don't want to combine anything that isn't a like term, but we want to combine as much as we can and distribute if we need to. All right, now that we've gotten our first page out of the way, I'm going to fold our notes in half, just like we always do. Create kind of a booklet here. And then we're going to move on to the inside. So we're actually going to do some practice with the distributive property and combining like terms. So I'm going to do the first one, and then I'll show you the second one, and then you'll try some on your own. So in this one, I actually put this problem in here because it's a special case. You notice that there's a sign right here, but there's no number. So what are we going to multiply by? Well, whenever we have a negative sign directly in front of parentheses, what they're really saying is that we're going to distribute -1. There's an imaginary 1 right there. So I'm going to take -1 times 2, which is a -2. And I'm going to do -1 times a -3x. See how the negative sign is attached there? Negative times a negative makes a positive. And 1 times 3x is 3x. Notice that this 7 is outside of the parentheses, so I will not be distributing -1 to that. It's going to say +7. Now, all they asked me to do here was distribute, so I can stop here, but just know that this is not as simplified as possible. We could do something else. All right, I want you to go ahead and try this one. We're going to distribute 3 to everything inside the parentheses. You should have gotten 6x minus 12. Really pay attention to that negative sign in front of the 4. This is a -4 times a +3, which is why it should be minus 12. All right, so this is distributing. We're going to talk about combining like terms. So remember, when we talk about like terms, these are things that have the same letter and the same exponent. So although these both have x's, this term has an exponent of 2 and this one is not. So these two are not like terms. I want you to think about which term we could combine with -4x squared. Which one has the same letter and the same exponent? All right, you should have said -4x squared and x squared. Those are the ones that are the same. Okay, Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to work through my expression, and when I simplify expressions, I always look for the things that have the biggest exponent. I actually only see 2 terms with exponents at all, so that's where I'm going to start. Notice that I circled the sign in front because we have to use the sign in front of the coefficient. And I'm going to see if there's anything with x squared. And there is. We already said there was. It's a positive x squared. So to combine this, I would say -4 plus 1, which is -3. And then we're going to keep the variable the same. And then I'm going to move to the next letter. So the next letter I see is x. So I'm going to see if there's anything I can combine with 5x. Can I combine 5x with y? No, those are not the same letter. Can I combine x with -3x? Yes, those are the same letter. Can I combine 5x with -10? No, -10 does not have an x. So notice that every time I've got like terms, I'm using a different color or maybe a different shape to indicate that, just to organize my work. 5 minus 3 makes a positive 2x. The next letter I see is positive 2y. Can I combine 2y and 10? No, they do not have the same letter, so I don't even need to think about it. I'm just going to write 2y. It's the only term with a y, so it's going to stay the same. And then lastly, I've got this -10. There is nothing else that's just a number, so that one is also going to stay the same. It's going to stay a -10. So this is as simplified as possible. We combined all like terms. This is as much simplifying as we could possibly do. All right. Key thing here. For all the problems we're seeing today, we're talking about expressions. And expressions do not have an equal sign. So we can't solve them. We can only simplify them by using the distributive property and or combining like terms. All right, we've got 3 examples. We're going to do one together, and then I will have you try the other 2. We're going to try this one together. Okay, so when I look at this expression, the first thing I notice is that there's parentheses. And when we talk about order of operations, parentheses always come first. So I'm going to look at these parentheses, and I see a positive 2 directly outside of the parentheses. So that tells me I need to distribute a positive 2 to everything inside the parentheses. Everything else, I'm just going to copy it down the way that I already see it. So 30x squared is just going to be brought down. 5x is going to be brought down. Now I'm using this 2 when I multiply, so I'm not going to keep it anymore. 2 times 10 is a positive 20. 2 times 2y is a positive 4y. And then see how there's the parenthesis here closes this little section? So I'm done distributing, and then the last thing I need to bring down is 4x squared. Now I'm going to go ahead and see if I can combine any like terms. So I'm looking for exponents. I do see x squared, so now I'm going to check and see if there's any other x squareds. This one doesn't have the exponent. No. Yes. So positive 4x squared. So I'm going to combine these 2 things. 30 plus 4 is 34x squared. And then I see no other exponents, so I'm going to move on to the next letter. And I see 5x. And that doesn't have an x. That doesn't have an x. So it's just going to stay the same. The next term that I see with a letter is not this one. It's this guy. And I do not see anything else that has a y in it. So that is also going to be brought down. It's already as simplified as possible. And then lastly, I've got that plus 20. It's the only constant, so I'm also going to bring that down. So this is already as simplified as possible. I'm done, and we're going to move on to the next one. Go ahead and try these 2, and then we'll type our answers and check your work at the end. All right, here's what you should have gotten. If you need to go back and fix your work, fix your work. Otherwise, we're going to glue this into our notebooks. So you should have your unit divider glued into a point page where you can see this at the front of your notebook. We're going to turn our notebook to the next page. And directly after this orange unit divider, we're going to glue in our notes and add a title. Glue them in and add the title.